So, Ian, thanks for joining us today. You're the Chief Technical and Operations Officer for BluGlass, an ASX listed company that's been developing cutting edge semiconductor technology for more than a decade. Before we dive into the technical side, could you give our listeners a quick sense of your background and what drew you to lead innovation at BluGlass?
Yeah, well, my background's in material science, and look, I've always been involved on sort of the applied research and technology side of the material side of innovation. Real passion for innovation. I've worked with a number of startups over the years, either in startups or helping startups develop their products. And look, when I was first learned about BluGlass, I was really drawn to their opportunity because first of all, there wasn't a lot of deep tech going on, and certainly in the semiconductor space in Australia. And I was really attracted to their bold ambition to be innovative in a relatively new material system, which is called gallium nitride. And I'll be touching on that, throughout our discussion this morning. And look, really just wanted to jump and join those guys almost immediately when I learned of the opportunity.
Great. So you joined BluGlass to lead its technical and operations execution. Can you walk us through the original challenge the company set out to solve and how that influenced your own decision to come on board?
Yeah, when first learning about BluGlass, their technology, which was a fantastic technology, spun off of Macquarie University, definitely had all the hallmarks of, very differentiated, novel, and was playing in a space that, definitely was a high scale, high volume manufacturing, all the kinds of things that I'm interested in. As a background in material science, I really saw opportunity for this technology. Probably the biggest thing that drew me to it was actually the initial application space. I've always sort of been passionate about energy efficiency, and the blue glass technology in the early days was absolutely targeting things like LED and solar cells, both with huge potential impact for energy savings and energy efficiency.
Great. And Blue Glass has developed something called RPCVD technology, which sounds incredibly technical to me. Could you break that down for our listeners who aren't semiconductor engineers? What makes that different from traditional methods?
Yeah, the RPCVD technology is a class of thin film deposition, and certainly for semiconductor materials, thin film deposition is a key step in designing and manufacturing those kind of semiconductors. And the CVD, which stands for chemical vapor deposition, which implies that we're sort of using gases as the source material. And essentially what we're doing is depositing, thin layers of atoms at a time. And we're trying to make it such that the atoms line up really well to give us good properties of materials. Now, the RP stands for remote plasma, and that's the special sauce that the Blue Glass has developed and innovated and patented over the years, which is essentially using a plasma source to actually break some of the bonds of the gases that when we do this thin film deposition. And that's in contrast to the incumbent technology, the standard technology used in industry today. It's called MOCVD, which stands for metal organic. And the idea there is that with this technology or the standard technology, is they're really using temperature instead of a plasma source to dissociate ammonia to make the nitrogen for the available for gallium nitride. With that said, both the RPCVD and the standard MOCVD technology each have their own benefits, and I'll probably touch on that when we get more into the technology side of things.
Okay, great. And your company talks about powering smarter, cleaner, more efficient photonics of tomorrow. From your vantage as CTO, what makes your tech so well suited to those next gen applications?
Yeah, next gen certainly is always looking for pushing the envelope on performance, often wants higher efficiency. Our core business today, for example, is making gallium nitride laser diodes. And while there's always a need for higher efficiency, there's another factor that is often needed, and it's referred to as a low swap or low swap C. And swap's just an acronym for, we want low size, weight, low power requirements, and the C is for you want low cost. And one of the ideas that Blue Glass is sort of pioneering is this idea of combining our two technologies, the standard MOCVD technology with our own developed RPCVD technology, with the idea that we can take advantage, sort of, in essence, have the best of both worlds, take some of the low cost and performance advantages that you get with the MOCVD, but then enhance it with performance using the RPCVD technology. So, in a nutshell, that's the way we're looking at trying to tackle some of these next generation opportunities.
Mhm. And you guys have been really in the trenches of the development journey. Did you anticipate just how long and complex it would be to get this tech to a commercially ready stage? And how has your team adapted over time?
Yeah, so look, our early days of BluGlass, we were pioneering an equipment technology, a process technology, and now more recently with our business direction to make lasers, it's a device. So you actually have to sort of be, world class at all three aspects. So we kind of knew that the process was going to take a long time, and I would just say that in many startups and new techs, time can be something that is known, but at the same time, I think what we have had to do is, be dynamic and change to some of the market requirements. So a good example in our case is that a lot of manufacturing of LEDs, like it went to China pretty quickly. And as a result, we had to adapt and course correct our business model. So I don't think we initially anticipated all of I guess, the business pivot changes. But during that whole time, we continually developed the underlying GaN technology in a manufacturing environment. And I would say that has enabled us to go to these new markets, relatively swiftly. It wasn't like we had to start over again in any particular case. And then in terms of adaptability in the team, super proud of our team, how they've been able to be nimble enough to go to those different technology. But that's in part because, we have brought together a team of experts in this material system and have really invested not just on one aspect, but sort of all aspects of the technology, which comes down to the equipment, the process, and more recently, the device side of things.
Mhm. You've mentioned that solving the complex or impossible is part of your job description. What's the biggest technical hurdle you've had to overcome in developing this technology?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Look, there are a number of hurdles, but I would say probably the biggest one is the scaling aspect of this new technology. So this technology, which was spun off from Macquarie University, amazing proof of concept done in the early years, fantastic uh, R&D and demonstrations performed. But it became sort of evident that we really had to sort of industrialize the special part of the technology, which was related to this RP part, the remote plasma. And what we wanted to do was clearly demonstrate is that this technology could scale and compare with the incumbent technology, which is called this MOCVD technology. So the way we actually had to go about doing that is we ended up looking for industrial partners. And I would just say, you know, w- I think with any startup, that early engagement with industry, not just specifically customer on specs, but you can be even on the supplier side. And we were very fortunate to have a very strong partnership with another equipment company that helped us develop. And in the end, we ended up using a lot of that technology from that collaboration into our source to try and help address and solve this scaling issue for RPCVD. And we're well and truly feel that we've met that requirement, certainly for our laser diode business. But that took clever innovation on our team side, but also, as I said, with the partnering strategy, a real pivotal point for us in knowing that our technology could scale to the kind of volumes that we will need ultimately for production.
Mhm. And I imagine there have been moments where things weren't working as expected. Could you tell us about a particularly challenging period and how you pushed through it?
Yeah, this is probably true for all startups where there's unexpected things that happen and challenges. I think for us, when we commenced our laser diode business, at the time we were doing all this thin film deposition of the GaN materials. That was all done here in Australia. We had a great test facility in the US, but we were required to sort of outsource part of the fabrication steps to make those lasers. And because this is sort of a new technology, we had to work with contract manufacturers, and they themselves were trying to develop, in parallel with us, the process is needed. And that was a relatively slow process. I would say that we made significant progress there to de-risk parts of the fabrication and manufacturing. But to overcome this challenge that we had of just probably being too slow in our development is we kind of really had a change of strategy in that we ended up raising more money to acquire a facility and a team to do that fabrication. So in essence, we went from this focused on just making the laser wafers into now a completely vertically integrated company where we design, manufacture, and sell the lasers. And that was a big step for us. And it's paid dividends in the sense that the acceleration of the development has increased, but not only that, it's given us a much broader reach for products that we could touch on, which we never would have been able to do if we had stuck with that contract manufacturing model. So that's probably the biggest thing that's been overcome in the last few years, and it's still working its way through to production right now.
BluGlass's technology promises performance advantages and cleaner manufacturing, but getting industry adoption for new processes can be incredibly slow. What's your experience been with that?
Yeah, so not unique to Blue Glass. Certainly, a common approach is to work with early adopters. And for example, we have contracts with other startup companies who are, kind of leading the way on innovative uses of lasers, for example. So it's really important to sort of, work with those early adopters. We have a pipeline of some of these larger opportunities with these larger organizations. They're completely aware that we are developing the technology already on a sort of manufacturing and scalable set of equipment and processes. So this is kind of a big difference, and maybe a little bit more common in semiconductor, but less common in maybe other areas where we're not really like doing a prototype and then going, oh, now we have to reinvent the wheel and have different equipment and different sizes. So we're already working on the commercial scale sizes of equipment, the commercial size wafers. We're already using the best in class inputs, even though for some of the product development. So that gives some confidence to some of those larger players. And, it's probably just a matter of time before we get a bit of a domino effect with some of our pipeline and our customers. I will also just say that, part of our strategy at the current moment is accepting the fact that we have to get these, customer paying projects before sort of volume production can come to fruition. And these projects are absolutely critical because not only are they, helping us, understand the customer requirements, but they are helping us differentiate our technology even further from some of the competition, for example.
And just to shift our focus a little bit here, let's talk about the financial side. So breakthroughs in deep tech don't follow quarterly cycles. As someone leading R&D in a public company listed on the ASX, how do you align long development timelines with the expectations of public investors?
Well, it's certainly true that some of the tech progress doesn't always go to quarterly reports, but I would just say that the tech does progress in a continuous manner, even though sometimes it's nonlinear. And really, I think the best thing we can do there and we do is trying to communicate the pipeline of opportunities, and that's communicating with shareholders, but not just shareholders, but with our stakeholders as well, like including potential future customers, to try and keep them informed of our latest developments. Certainly, we intend things like the industry conferences where we're presenting the latest developments in progress, and certainly those are all being shared in some shape or form with shareholders. We've also put out things like white papers to try and explain some of the ins and outs and the potentials of the opportunity. So that's sort of one way to help mitigate with some of the shareholder expectation on the timeline. I do think we've been very fortunate with many of our shareholders who have been patient with us over the years. But at the end of the day, a lot of shareholders are looking for those revenue yardsticks, which are currently happening, and just that we're trying to improve the pace of that.
hmm I know you just briefly touched on this, but have you ever had investors who just didn't understand the timeline required for this kind of deep tech development? And how do you handle those conversations?
Yeah, so obviously being ASX listed, clearly we have quite a healthy mix of shareholders. Some might be more strategic, and some are, more of the mums and dads. And obviously, we have to try and make the best returns for all of those shareholders. And I would just say on that communication piece, we really are trying to let the shareholders know that there is this pipeline of opportunity, but it really is all underpinned on this deep tech investment that's been made over the last 10 plus years. And all of that investment is sort of like culminating into this opportunity now, that we've sort of put it all into the laser diode basket. And some of those opportunities are just potentially massive in the future, but they each have some different timelines. So, for example, some of our markets that we're playing in today in defense and biomedical and the really exciting one of quantum, they do have some different timescales. And this, going back to your early question, we are trying to mitigate some of that by having this project to product strategy, getting in paying customers for early adoption of, some of the more customized ways of doing the technology.
Mhm. Okay, and while investor relations might not be your primary remit, how does your experience in managing complex development timelines shape what you look for in strategic investors or partners?
Yeah, so I think, the distinction there, so there's obviously a strategic partner who might invest, that might look very different because clearly, that partner may have a vested interest in one of the markets that we're chasing. So certainly that'll be very formative, if someone was willing to put money into one aspect, then that might obviously steer the program more in that direction. With that said, this core building block, which we're calling our gallium nitride laser diode, like that entire platform really is the underpinning of all of the potential product avenues that we go. And while there's distinct attributes that we will do in the future for different markets, it really all is built off of that. So that expectation, I think, I think we've made that very clear to those types of shareholders. With the sort of more strategic financial investor, and certainly, we have some of those on our register. These financial institutions that, again, they have maybe a domain of expertise that they're interested in the market. Quantum being one very good example, where a lot of eyes are very anxious to see who the key players can be in that space. But they also, bring a bit more sustainability to the share register, and also, probably a bit more expecting that, hey, the long-term returns, will take some time because some of these, quantum being the best example, they will take some time. And I'm mentioning quantum a couple of reasons because, Australia is very prolific in that development, both from research but all the way through to commercialization now. And there's different flavors of quantum opportunities. There's things like quantum sensing, which are actually, happening right now. So there's opportunities for revenue and commercial projects now, but there's certainly a really large potential upside for quantum computing. And those, but while they may take longer, trying to position ourselves now is a critical thing. We're trying to communicate that to our existing shareholders.
Mhm. And what makes a good investor for a company like BluGlass, not just financially, but in terms of mindset and long-term support?
Yeah, so touched a little bit on that, probably on the last question, but again, definitely looking for, some domain expertise in the area that they might be investing, whether that's bringing a network of other like-minded shareholders, but also sort of having, the understanding that, the investments will take some time, and we are in a position with BluGlass is looking to go from this project to product strategy, and just being mindful that, when we go to those kinds of scales, things will move very quickly and, may have more capital requirements.
Mhm. After more than a decade of development, BluGlass has launched commercial products, partnered obviously with other industry leading partners. From your perspective, what does this business momentum mean to you personally and professionally?
Yeah, well, certainly that momentum, and I can't stress enough that really off the back of years of a lot of hard effort, fantastic teamwork, by all those involved, and just a lot of support from shareholders and just our stakeholders in general. But I would just say on the professional side of things, certainly having been a part of building that team, and certainly the team here in Australia is a core team, been here for well over 10 years. My US counterparts, coming up on several years, it's been absolute, really rewarding to be working with all them to see the progress and that momentum and seeing it turn into, contracts and revenues and getting into customers' product development cycles. That's been a huge reward to see that. And on a personal note, just tying back to a passion for innovation and just really wanting to see, an impact of the technology here developed in Australia, and truly believe that Australian has great tech, and just really wanting to see it all the way through to commercialization. And I'm actually living that in the day to day right now. So it's super exciting and super rewarding, both personally and professionally.
Great. And looking back, was the long journey worth it? What would you say to other tech founders or engineers venturing into similar deep tech ventures?
Absolutely, no regrets at all, and I've enjoyed the journey. Yes, there's been downs, but plenty of ups. And again, sort of coming back to that, coming to work, absolute pleasure working with the team. And I would just say, the team has changed over the years, and have been building off of the results and the great efforts from people in prior years too is an important point. I would just say that, in terms of thinking about other founders in early days. Um, while I've sort of said, hey, obviously, founder is going to have passion, it's going to have expertise, but n no one is going to know, um, the technology as well as they do. But they will need a team around them. And while it might be a little cliche to sort of say, oh, you just hire good people, I think one thing that I can share from experience is that, particularly because we're in a materials and a deep tech play, is you need obviously a lot of multidisciplinary skills. And I would even argue that it's not enough to just hire one expert for every aspect that you need. You actually need a lot of crossover in your skills. So hiring two or three people that have similar skill sets and expertise, the amount of return you get on that by each person challenging each other, and the more innovation you'll get out of that. And I realize that that can be difficult because you might not have the resources or the money. And I do think for startups and for founder advice, you have to be as resourceful as you can. Tapping into our local universities, for example, a ton of expertise there. So they can backfill some gaps, for example, whether using them part-time or whether you're establishing research grants with them. And obviously the university is, very rich in ideas and innovation. And importantly, you'll build those relationships, and it's a good hiring ground for future employees. So I can't underestimate that enough as part of the certainly in the formative years of an early stage startup.
Yeah, perfect. And just on that note about teams, how do you maintain team motivation and momentum during those long development cycles when progress might feel incremental?
Yeah, so motivation again, obviously I think, really important on the higher end, you really want to make sure passion to innovation, and that there's a healthy expertise there. But the simplest thing is, you got to keep challenging them, letting people rise to the occasion. And again, I would just say, clearly has to be in a team approach to things. And I do think people, see the rewards when not necessarily all of their ideas get used, but when they know that they've had a crack at their idea. And I think really, the real reward, at least for all the people I know that work at BluGlass, is really actually seeing the results come through, whether it's improved performance in lasers or, winning a customer contract. That really is the ultimate motivation to keep people on track. And some that's taken time, right? But we're at that stage now, and certainly everyone I'm working with super motivated to keep contributing and look forward to the journey ahead.
Mhm. And just on that note again about the journey ahead, what's next for BluGlass after this long journey to commercialization? What are you most excited about?
Yeah, well, certainly we're right in the thick of the commercialization right now, with some contract wins. You mentioned a few like the DoD contract that we've been fulfilling and now contracts with customers and working on like the problems that we kind of want to be solved, whether it's UV for sterilization or whether it's lasers for quantum computers. That really is the next phase, is this project to product, getting more of those projects, delivering on the pipeline of opportunities. The tech obviously continue to improve, and also that manufacturing side of things, even though I mentioned that, we're using the same kind of manufacturing equipment to do the R&D, to do the product development. We still want to have that mindset that ultimately we want to be ready for when that product ramp happens.
All right, I've got two more questions for you just before we wrap up. If you had to give one piece of advice to a founder starting a deep tech company today, knowing what you know now about the patience required, what would it be?
Tough to give just one, but one that I would say, especially from a background in a deep tech style company, is you know don't listen to the naysayers. You're going to have a lot of people that are going to doubt some of the things that you're doing because at the end of the day, you're bringing some new innovation, and I can say that you know, you have the expertise, you have, probably the best knowledge of your business or your tech than anyone. So you kind of have to stick to your original thinking. And yes, there'll be challenges, but I really do think that, sometimes listening to someone who may have a cursory view of your technology, and I can speak to experience where, a lot of people didn't think in the early days of BluGlass that low temperature would work or that it would have too low efficiency. And, we proved all of those things wrong, basically working off of first principles and showing and then actually delivering on the technology. So that would be probably the biggest piece of advice I could say.
Mhm. Okay, and finally, Blue Glass will be joining our upcoming panel on patients in tech development. What's the key message you want to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, so I think one of the main messages certainly is, for founders, don't go it alone, and by that I mean quite a few things. It's hiring that multidisciplinary team that I was referring to, but you're in it with your shareholders and your stakeholders, your customers, your local government, and that education piece of trying to help others understand what it is you're trying to do is really an important piece because, at the end of the day, you want to keep attracting talent, you want to keep attracting capital, you want to keep customers engaged with what's coming down the pipeline of your tech, and that will be in a dynamic environment. Whatever you plan on day one will absolutely change by the time you get to commercialization. So I think just knowing that as a founder, trying to make every single decision on your own without a lot of healthy input and debate is very challenging. And I think you've got to embrace the idea that you really do need a team to deliver on. Um, Maybe if I could just squeeze in a second one, I think you asked for one, but the second one is, and this is certainly true in our case, but trying to build the manufacturing and scalability in as early as possible as your technology will allow. I really feel like while that may be a little bit more costly in the early days, but I really think that will pay off in the future when you get to scale and get to production. You really want to be doing that from the start of your design of your technology.
Well, Dr. Ian Mann, Chief Technical and Operations Officer, Blue Glass, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today.